The day I met Claire was the day my life began to change, or so I thought. I was 23, exhausted from working double shifts at a cafe and living in a cramped apartment that smelled of rain and regret. My parents had passed away years ago, and the world had since shown me its colder side. Friends drifted away. Love faded into silence. I had learned to live with emptiness, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Then came her. Claire walked into the cafe one afternoon. A woman in her early 50s, graceful, confident, and wrapped in the kind of warmth that made you feel seen. She ordered her coffee with a smile and asked for my name. Lily, I said shyly. She repeated it softly as if tasting the syllables. A beautiful name for a beautiful soul. From that day on she came often. Always sitting by the window, always choosing my section. We began to talk about books, art, dreams, and life. She had a way of listening that made me feel important, like my thoughts actually mattered. It had been years since anyone had looked at me that way, with kindness without expectation. One evening, after I spilled a tray of drinks in front of customers, my boss yelled at me until my hands shook. Claire waited until he left, then gently took my wrist and said, "You don't belong here, darling. You're meant for more than this." Those words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know it then, but she was already beginning to weave her way into my heart. A week later she offered me a job at her boutique, a small but elegant fashion store downtown. "I need someone young, creative, and trustworthy," she said with a motherly smile. "And you, Lily, have the heart for it." I hesitated. Felt too good to be true. But something about her, her voice, her confidence, her warmth, made it impossible to say no. I left my cafe job and joined her world. From day one, Claire treated me like family. She would bring me breakfast, ask if I'd eaten, tell me to call her if I ever needed anything. When I stayed late, she insisted on driving me home. She even bought me a new coat when she saw how thin mine was. "You're like the daughter I never had," she said once, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I remember that moment vividly, the way my chest tightened, the way my eyes burned. No one had said something so gentle to me in years. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. Over time I began to open up. I told her about my parents, my fears, my lonely nights. She listened with tears in her eyes. She told me stories of her own childhood, her lost husband, her regrets. I thought we understood each other. I thought we were two souls who had found comfort in the same kind of pain. She introduced me to her friends, her clients, even her accountant. "This is Lily," she'd say proudly. "Pie girl." Every time she said it, I felt a rush of belonging that I couldn't explain. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I didn't notice the small things then. The way her eyes lingered on my paychecks, the subtle questions about my finances, the paper she asked me to sign, just to help with inventory. I was blinded by affection, by the idea that someone finally cared. Looking back now, I realize Claire didn't save me. She studied me. She learned what I needed most, a mother's love, and gave it to me in just the right doses to earn my trust. At the time though, I thought I'd finally found my home. I didn't know that the same woman who called me her daughter would soon become the reason my entire life fell apart. At first, everything still felt perfect. The boutique was thriving and Claire treated me like her right hand. She'd often say, "Lily, you're the heart of this place." Those words became my fuel. I worked harder, stayed late, and did everything to make her proud. But then, little cracks began to appear. It started with paperwork, forms she'd ask me to sign on her behalf because she was too busy. "You know how these things are," she'd say with a laugh. "Just business formalities." I trusted her completely, so I never asked questions. I signed whatever she placed before me, smiling as she called me her responsible girl. Soon, the warmth in her tone started to change. There were moments when her words cut deeper than they should have. A missed call became, "You're getting careless, Lily." A small accounting mistake became, "You're making me look bad." I brushed it off, telling myself she was stressed. She had done so much for me, how could I think ill of her? But the tension kept building. One afternoon, I overheard her speaking to someone on the phone. Her voice was low, sharp, nothing like the gentle tone I knew. "She trusts me completely," she said, followed by a dry laugh. "Yes, everything is under her name now. It'll look clean." My stomach twisted. Under her name? Who was she talking about? I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, but a shadow of unease crept into my heart that refused to fade. Days later, I came to work to find two police officers standing by the counter. They asked for me by name. My heart pounded as they explained I was under investigation for embezzlement. I froze. Clara appeared moments later, her face pale, trembling, her voice weak. "Oh, Lily," she whispered, eyes glistening with fake tears. "How could you do this to me?" The room spun. I didn't understand. The officers showed me documents, bank transfers, signatures, forms I had signed without question. My handwriting. My name. My world crumbled. I turned to her, my voice shaking. "Clara, you know I didn't do this." She avoided my gaze. "I trusted you like a daughter," she said, her voice breaking just enough to sound believable. "And this is how you repay me." The betrayal was so clean, so perfect that even I began to doubt myself. By evening I was suspended from work. Friends whispered behind my back. People who once smiled at me now crossed the street to avoid me. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how the woman I loved like a mother could turn me into her scapegoat. And then one night, as I lay awake in the silence of my tiny apartment, I realized the truth. Claire had never loved me. She had studied me, planned this, and used my trust as her weapon. Her kindness was the mask. Her greed was the face beneath it. And I, foolishly, had mistaken both for love. The weeks after the betrayal were a blur of silence and humiliation. My name was dragged through the mud. People whispered when I passed. My landlord evicted me, saying he couldn't have a thief living on the property. I had nothing left, no job, no home, and no one who believed me. Except for the fire that began to grow inside me. At first it was small, just anger, confusion, heartbreak. But as the nights stretched on, that pain hardened into something sharper. Revenge. Clara thought she had destroyed me. She thought I'd disappear quietly, buried under the weight of her lies. But I refused to let the woman who stole my trust walk away unpunished. I may have been naive once, but I wasn't helpless anymore. I moved to a nearby town, took a small room in a cheap motel, and got a temporary job at a printing shop. From there I began to watch. Clara's boutique was still open, though business was slowing. Her customers didn't know the truth, but I would make sure they found out piece by piece. One evening I reached out to an old friend, Ethan, who had studied computer forensics. He had always believed me even when no one else did. When I told him my plan, he hesitated. "Lily, are you sure you want to go down this road?" I nodded. "She took everything from me. I'm not going to let her keep it." With Ethan's help I started digging. Every document I had signed, every bank statement, every email. I looked for patterns. And then finally I found it. Clara had forged digital signatures, altered payment trails, and shifted large amounts of money into shell accounts. All under my name. But buried deep in those records were traces. Timestamps, mismatched IP addresses, receipts that led directly back to her. It took weeks to gather everything. Every night, I stared at the evidence with trembling hands, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and triumph. He thought she was untouchable. He thought I was too broken to fight back. I began sending anonymous tips to her suppliers, her investors, and her clients. Rumors spread. Contracts were canceled. Her once glittering reputation began to crumble, just as she had destroyed mine. Then I went one step further. I sent a detailed file, proof of her crimes, to the authorities. No signature. No trace back to me. And I waited. The first time I saw her again was on the news. The proud, graceful Clara Matthews looked nothing like the woman who had once called me her daughter. She was surrounded by reporters, her face pale, her voice trembling as she denied everything. But the world had finally started to see her for what she really was. As I watched, I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. My revenge wasn't about satisfaction. It was about justice. For the first time in months I felt peace. Not because I had destroyed her, but because I had finally taken back me. The day Clara fell, the sky was heavy with rain. It was the kind of storm that felt cleansing, wild, merciless, and long overdue. I watched it unfold quietly from my apartment window. The news flashed her face across the screen. Local boutique owner arrested for fraud and embezzlement. Her once perfect smile was gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone cornered by their own lies. The woman who once carried herself like a queen now looked small, fragile, almost pitiful. It should have felt satisfying. This was everything I had worked for. Proof that justice existed, that truth could still find its way through deceit. But as I stared at her image, all I felt was an ache deep inside me. Revenge didn't taste sweet. It was heavy, bitter like ashes in my mouth. I remembered the woman who had braided my hair, who had called me my daughter, who had once said she'd protect me. Was that all an act? Or had there been moments, small fleeting moments, when she actually cared? I would never know, and that uncertainty hurt more than all her lies combined. Weeks later I visited her. The prison walls were gray, cold, and unwelcoming. A guard led me to a small visitation booth, where she sat behind a pane of glass, wearing an orange uniform. She looked older, her skin dull, her hands trembling slightly. When she saw me, her lips parted in disbelief. "Lily," she whispered. "You came." I nodded, my heart pounding. "I had to see you one last time." She leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "You did this to me." Her voice cracked. "After everything I gave you." I almost laughed, but it came out as a sigh. "You didn't give me love, Clara. You gave me a lesson. You taught me what trust should never feel like." She frowned, tears welling in her eyes. For a brief second I saw something human flicker there. Regret, maybe. Or fear. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said softly. I needed the money. I didn't think you'd fight back." That was the moment I realized she still didn't understand. To her, everything was still about control, about power. She didn't see the strength she had awakened in me. The strength of someone who had lost everything and survived anyway. "I fought back because you made me," I said. "And because I had to find myself again." She lowered her gaze, her tears falling freely now. I stood up, my hand resting on the glass between us. "Goodbye, Clara," I whispered. "I hope you find peace in what's left of your soul." As I walked out of that building, the rain had stopped. The air was clean, the clouds slowly parting. For the first time in a long while, I felt light, like the storm inside me had finally passed. Clara had tried to ruin my life for greed. But in the end, she only destroyed herself. And I, her once lost daughter, walked away free.